players trying to mess with his head. Now, that's his gun shot.
Sanchez.
If we were living in the Roman times, I would have killed you right there and then.
I would never let a white boy beat me. I would never let a white boy beat me. I would never let a white boy beat me.
The drama surrounding arrogance in boxing has always followed the same rhythm. It announces itself loudly, struts into the spotlight, convinced of its own inevitability, and for a brief moment it looks untouchable. Every fighter talks. Every fighter believes the rules bend for them. Every fighter, at some point, convinces themselves that discipline is optional because confidence alone will be enough. And then reality steps in uninvited and demands payment. It usually begins long before the bell rings. A microphone is placed in front of a fighter, and suddenly the fight is already over in their mind. Victory is spoken into existence with insults, threats, and declarations of superiority. Opponents are reduced to props in a performance rather than threats in a ring. Boxing, a sport built on consequence, is treated like theater. The debt begins accumulating the moment arrogance replaces preparation. There's a reason this pattern repeats so often. Boxing doesn't punish confidence. It punishes carelessness. The ring doesn't care how clever the trash talk was or how intimidating the stare down looked. It only responds to balance, timing, patience, and control. Ego, when unchecked, walks into the ring ahead of the fighter and absorbs the first clean shot. Jorge stepped into his fight as if the crowd had already paid to see him win. His movements were exaggerated, his confidence performative. This wasn't a battleground in his mind, it was a stage. The entrance, the gestures, the way he carried himself all suggested he believed the outcome was inevitable. He had never been pushed deep into fights before. He had never been forced to answer questions past 6 rounds. At 33, the legs were older, the reflexes slower, but the belief remained loud. Across from him stood Augi Sanchez, who said very little. He didn't react to the show. He didn't rush the moment. He watched. Sanchez understood something Jorge didn't. The fight doesn't start when the bell rings. It starts when one fighter decides they're already better and stops respecting what's coming back at them. The early rounds were filled with movement and noise, but little substance. Jorge danced, postured, tried to force moments that weren't there. Sanchez stayed patient, absorbing the rhythm, waiting for the performance to slip. Arrogance always creates openings because it demands attention. Discipline doesn't. By round 7, the show was over. Sanchez found the opening that ego always leaves behind. The punch was clean, precise, and unforgiving. A perfect left, delivered without emotion. Jorge's legs betrayed him before his mind could catch up. The finish wasn't dramatic. It was final. The Las Vegas Kid stood over the moment while the arena understood what had just happened. The debt had been collected. That pattern repeated again and again across weight classes, eras, and personalities. Kevin Kelly spoke as if the ending had already been written. He promised violence. He promised dominance. He promised that the bell would be his signal to erase Prince Nasim Hamed. Nasim heard every word and made sure Kelly heard him back. The build-up was loud, chaotic, theatrical. Nasim delayed his entrance on purpose, dancing behind the screen, stretching the moment thin just to get under Kelly's skin. It was psychological warfare, and it worked. When the fight began, the illusion shattered quickly. Kelly landed first. A looping right hand sent Nasim to the canvas, and for a split second the boxing world wondered if the performance had finally caught up with the fighter. But arrogance isn't always loud. Sometimes it's calm. Nasim got up smiling, adjusted, and began dismantling Kelly piece by piece. Speed replaced noise. Precision replaced bravado. Kelly went down twice, then again. By the time the fight ended, the lesson was clear. You can talk yourself into confidence, but you still have to live inside the consequences. Not all arrogance collapses immediately. Some of it lingers, looking for excuses. When Devin Haney faced Ryan Garcia, the buildup was hostile and chaotic. Words flew freely. Insults replaced analysis. Certainty poured out of Garcia's camp as a victory was inevitable. Inside the ring, though, the unraveling began quietly. Balance shifted. Chin control slipped. Timing betrayed intention. By the 7th round, the cracks were visible to everyone. The controversy came later, after failed drug tests and overturned results, but the damage to credibility was already done. Boxing remembers patterns, not excuses. Adrien Broner mastered the art of performance better than almost anyone. Every fight week was a show. The insults, the bravado, the confidence that bordered on parody. He spoke as if opponents were obstacles, not threats. Marcos Maidana didn't respond. He didn't need to. When the bell rang, Maidana walked Broner down and forced him into a fight he couldn't control. Right hands landed. Broner went down for the first time in his career. The crowd watched as talent met consequence. Broner survived, but the myth didn't. Other fighters never got the chance to survive. Rashid Kasum walked into the biggest fight of his life, already tense, already emotional. Joe Murray imposed himself immediately. Right hands crashed through the guard. Knockdowns came in waves. One clean shot ended it. There was no speech afterward. No explanation. Just silence. Hatred has its own version of arrogance. Jorge Luis Gonzalez carried old history into the ring with Riddick, treating the fight like unfinished business from the amateurs. He talked openly about violence, about what he would have done in another era. Bo didn't engage. He waited. From the opening round, the gap was clear. Gonzalez talked himself into a war that only one man was equipped to win. By the 6th round, the message had been delivered in punches. Gonzalez went down for the first time as a professional. The referee didn't bother finishing the count. Sometimes arrogance disguises itself as controversy. Bernard Hopkins said things designed to shock, to provoke, to dominate the narrative before the fight with Joe Calzaghe. Inside the ring, Calzaghe answered with volume, movement, and control. By the final bell, the noise meant nothing. Mastery spoke louder. There are moments when arrogance is mistaken for confidence, when fighters believe dismissing an opponent will weaken them. Vic Darinian treated Nonito Donaire as an afterthought. Donaire stayed composed. He waited. In the 5th round, the punch came. One of the knockouts of the year. Maybe of the era. Arrogance doesn't see what patience is building. This is why boxing remains unforgiving. It allows no shortcuts. It doesn't care about belief unless it's backed by preparation. The ring has no memory of trash talk. It only remembers what lands, what misses, and who breaks first. Part 1 of this story is not about villains losing. It's about lessons repeating, about ego stepping into the ring before discipline and finding out that the ropes don't bend for confidence. Every fighter who has ever been humbled shares one thing in common. They thought the fight was already over. And boxing, as it always does, reminded them it hadn't even begun. The drama surrounding arrogance doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it walks in quietly, disguised as certainty, wrapped in experience, reputation, or past success. Fighters convince themselves they've earned the right to take shortcuts. They've been through wars before. They've felt pressure before. They believe that because they've survived the fire once, the fire will respect them the next time. Boxing never does. There is a dangerous comfort that settles in when a fighter starts believing their name alone carries weight. When opponents are discussed as stepping stones instead of threats, preparation subtly changes. Sparring rounds lose urgency. Mistakes are tolerated instead of corrected. The mind shifts from survival to assumption. And assumption is one of the most expensive habits a fighter can carry into a ring. Thomas Tate tried to turn his moment into comedy. He mocked Roy Jones Jr., dismissed him publicly, and treated the fight like a foregone conclusion. The cameras caught every word. The build-up felt light, almost unserious, as if Tate believed the danger was exaggerated. But when the action started, the gap revealed itself immediately. Roy Jones Jr. didn't need theatrics. He didn't need noise. He needed seconds. Clean shots landed. Tate went down hard in the 2nd round. and the fight was over before it ever found rhythm. Confidence without respect had no room to breathe. That's the part arrogance never understands. It shortens fights, but not in the way the arrogant fighter expects. There are fighters who talk because it's who they are, and fighters who talk because they're trying to convince themselves. The second group is always in trouble. When words are used to mask doubt, the body usually exposes the truth. Boxing is brutally honest that way. You can hide fear behind insults for only so long before your feet give it away. Bernard Hopkins built an entire persona on psychological warfare. He said things designed to inflame, divide, and dominate the narrative before the first punch was thrown. Against Joe Calzaghe, the buildup was filled with controversy, tension, and comments meant to draw attention away from the actual fight. Hopkins wanted control before the bell. But inside the ring, Calzaghe refused to be distracted. He didn't chase moments. He didn't react emotionally. He worked. Punches came in volume. Movement disrupted rhythm. By the final bell, the story had rewritten itself. All the noise had faded, replaced by a clear verdict written in clean exchanges and sustained pressure. That's the difference between arrogance and confidence. Confidence adapts. Arrogance insists. Sometimes the collapse is more violent. Vic Darinian entered his fight unbeaten, powerful and dismissive. Nonito Donaire was treated like a footnote, a name without weight. Darinian's body language said everything. He believed the fight would follow the same pattern as all the others. Donaire stayed calm, absorbed what he needed to see, and waited. As the rounds passed, Darinian's wild swings created openings. His hands dropped. His balance shifted. In the fifth round, Donaire stepped in and delivered a left hand that changed everything. It wasn't just a knockout. It was a statement. One punch that erased assumptions built over years. Those moments echo longer than titles. They linger because they reveal how fragile certainty really is. Arrogance also feeds on memory. Fighters remember who they were, not who they are. They recall past dominance and expect it to repeat itself automatically. But boxing evolves faster than nostalgia. Rashid Kasum stepped into the biggest fight of his life with pressure already weighing heavy. Joe Murray didn't give him time to breathe. From the opening exchanges, Kasum was forced backward, eating right hands through the guard. Knockdowns piled up, each one chipped away not just at his body, but at the belief that carried him there. One perfectly timed shot ended it. No theatrics, no long build-up, just consequence. Then there are fighters who carry hatred instead of arrogance, confusing emotion for motivation. Jorge Luis Gonzalez treated his fight with Riddick like a personal reckoning. Old wounds from the amateurs resurfaced. The trash talk was explicit, violent, and unfiltered. Gonzalez wanted the fight to be emotional. He wanted chaos. Bo didn't give it to him. He let the talking pass and waited for the bell. From the opening round, the difference in class was unmistakable. Gonzalez rushed. Bo punished. By the sixth round, the past no longer mattered. Gonzalez hit the canvas for the first time as a professional, and the referee didn't even bother completing the count. Emotion had burned itself out. Boxing doesn't reward anger. It exploits it. Adrien Broner learned that lesson in public. He treated his build-up like a stage show, mocking Marcos Maidana's preparation, dismissing his strength, questioning his relevance. Broner believed skills alone would carry him through, and in many fights, they had. But Maidana didn't care about the script. He swarmed, pressured, and forced exchanges that stripped Broner of control. The right hands landed. Broner went down for the first time in his career. The fight dragged him into uncomfortable territory round after round. Even though Broner survived, something irreversible happened that night. The illusion cracked. Once that happens, it never fully heals. That's the danger of arrogance. It doesn't just lose fights. It alters trajectories. Some fighters never recover mentally. Others adjust. But the sport remembers. Fans remember. Opponents remember. Once you've been exposed, every future challenge arrives with sharper intent. Boxing has a long memory, and it punishes repeat offenders more harshly. This second chapter isn't about isolated moments. It's about patterns stacking on top of each other. Different eras, different weight classes, same outcome. Fighters who believed words could replace discipline. Fighters who thought intimidation was preparation. Fighters who mistook reputation for readiness. The ring doesn't negotiate. It doesn't compromise. It doesn't care who you were supposed to be. It only cares about what you can prove in the next 3 minutes. And for every fighter who walks in believing the fight is already won, there's another standing across from them, quiet, patient, and fully prepared to collect the debt. Because in boxing, arrogance always pays. And the interest is brutal. Arrogance doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers reassurance at exactly the wrong moment. It tells fighters they've already seen everything this opponent can offer. It convinces them that danger is predictable, that chaos has limits, that experience alone is armor. That whisper is often louder than any trash talk because it settles deep into preparation, into pacing, into decisions that feel logical right up until they aren't. Kevin Kelly believed the ending was already written. He spoke like a man reading from the final page before the book was opened. Confident, direct, unapologetic. Prince Nasim Hamed heard every word and responded not with denial, but with theater. The long entrance, the dancing, the deliberate delay meant to stretch Kelly's nerves thin. It looked like arrogance, and in many ways it was. But there was something else underneath it, something sharper. Nasim wasn't trying to convince himself. He was trying to pull Kelly out of himself. When the bell rang, reality cut through the performance. Kelly landed first. A looping right hand dropped the prince to the canvas, and for a moment the boxing world leaned forward. The image shattered the myth. The untouchable had been touched. The fraud narrative crept in instantly. This was supposed to be the moment arrogance collapsed. But arrogance and confidence look identical right up until pressure tests them. Nasim got up without panic. No wild eyes. No rushed retaliation. He adjusted. The fight shifted into something far more dangerous than spectacle. Kelly had proven a point, but proving a point and surviving the response are two very different things. As rounds passed, Nasim's timing sharpened. His counters grew more precise. Kelly began walking into shots he couldn't see coming. Then it happened. A clean left. Kelly went down. The balance of the fight snapped back violently. The confidence Kelly carried into the ring didn't disappear all at once. It drained punch by punch. That fight is remembered not because arrogance was punished, but because misplaced certainty was. Kelly believed bravery alone could close the gap. Nasim showed him that bravery without adaptation is just exposure. Then there are fighters who never even get that far. Fighters who mistake volume for dominance. Jorge P. treated the ring like a stage, not a battleground. Everything about his movement suggested performance. He wanted attention, reactions, moments. Augi Sanchez didn't give him any. Sanchez stayed patient, watched the show, and waited. The longer the fight went, the quieter the performance became. By round 7, the opening appeared. One clean punch. Perfect placement. The ending arrived without drama. The crowd reacted not to noise, but to inevitability. That's what arrogance fails to understand. Boxing isn't impressed by activity. It's impressed by accuracy. The same lesson repeated itself across divisions and decades. Deontay Haney spoke with certainty that bordered on concern. He didn't just dismiss his opponent. He questioned his normalcy, his mental state, his legitimacy. Those words weren't strategy. They were projection. Inside the ring, that certainty unraveled. Timing betrayed him. Balance slipped. Control vanished. When the breaking point came, it wasn't subtle. It was public. The aftermath only deepened the damage. Failed tests. Overturned results. Reputation replaced by doubt. Sometimes arrogance doesn't just lose you a fight. Sometimes it stains everything around it. And then there's the kind of arrogance that disguises itself as humor. Thomas Tate joked. Adrien Broner joked. Even when the punches started landing back, Broner smiled, talked, shrugged. But his body told a different story. Maidana dragged him into exchanges that didn't allow space for jokes. Each round chipped away at Broner's control. Knockdowns rewrote his self-image in real time. By the end, Broner was still standing, but something fundamental had shifted. He had been forced into a fight he couldn't dictate. That stays with a fighter longer than bruises. Some fighters grow from it. Others chase the version of themselves that existed before the fall. What ties all these moments together isn't humiliation. It's exposure. Boxing exposes timing, discipline, preparation, and ego with equal efficiency. It reveals who can adjust and who can't, who listens mid-fight, and who keeps insisting the original plan will eventually work if they just believe harder. Belief without awareness is one of the most dangerous traps in the sport. This is where arrogance quietly turns into liability. When fighters stop reacting to what's happening and start fighting what they expected to happen. When they chase moments instead of reading patterns. When they confuse heart with strategy. The ring doesn't reward stubbornness. It punishes it with precision. And that punishment doesn't always come immediately. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it lets the arrogant fighter think they're still in control, still ahead, still safe. Then, one mistake opens the door and everything rushes in at once. These are not accidents. They are consequences. Every generation produces fighters who believe they're immune to history, who think they found a new way to bypass fundamentals, who believe charisma can bend physics. And every generation produces moments that remind everyone watching that boxing remains stubbornly unchanged. Hands still drop, feet still cross, balance still matters, timing still decides everything. And no matter how loudly a fighter declares dominance beforehand, the ring always gets the final word. In the next chapter, we'll see what happens when arrogance doesn't just meet resistance, but meets silence. When the opponent doesn't talk back, doesn't react, doesn't flinch. Because the most dangerous fighter isn't the loudest one in the room. It's the one who's already done the work. Silence is often mistaken for fear in boxing. When an opponent doesn't engage in the verbal warfare, doesn't respond to insults, doesn't trade bravado for headlines, the arrogant fighter fills the gap with assumptions. He imagines hesitation. He imagines intimidation working. He imagines control. What he's really seeing is focus, and focus is far more dangerous than anger. Riddick understood that better than most. When Jorge Luis Gonzalez carried his old hatred into the ring, fueled by memories from the amateur days, he wanted confrontation before the bell ever rang. He wanted to reopen wounds, to force Bo into a fight that started emotionally instead of technically. Bo never took the bait. He let Gonzalez talk, posture, and relive history. When the bell rang, the present took over. From the opening round, the difference wasn't just physical. It was mental. Gonzalez rushed with intent but no patience. Bo stood his ground, absorbed what little danger came his way, and returned it with structure. By the sixth round, the message was delivered cleanly. Gonzalez hit the canvas for the first time in his professional career, and the referee didn't bother finishing the count. The silence before the fight had been preparation, not submission. That pattern repeats wherever arrogance meets discipline. Fighters who don't need to announce their plans rarely have to adjust them mid-fight. They let opponents burn energy trying to dominate the narrative, while they quietly control distance, timing, and rhythm. Joe Calzaghe did exactly that against Bernard Hopkins. The buildup was loud, controversial, and inflammatory. Hopkins knew how to command attention, how to turn words into weapons. Calzaghe let it all pass. Inside the ring, the talking stopped mattering. Hopkins landed moments, flashes of veteran craft, but Calzaghe's output never slowed. Punches came in combinations, angles shifted, and the tempo steadily increased. By the final bell, the contrast was unmistakable. One fighter had tried to win the fight before it began. The other won it round by round. Arrogance struggles against fighters who refuse to participate in the performance. There's a particular discomfort that sets in when trash talk doesn't produce reaction. When intimidation fails, it leaves behind uncertainty. Fighters start forcing moments that aren't there. They reach. They lunge. They break their own structure trying to impose something that won't stick. That's when discipline starts to look like cruelty. Rashid Kasum learned that lesson the hard way. Entering the biggest fight of his life, the pressure was obvious. Joe Murray didn't respond with bravado. He responded with right hands. From the opening exchanges, Kasum was under siege. Knockdowns came not from wild attacks, but from clean, repeated execution. Murray didn't rush the finish. He let the openings appear. One perfectly timed shot in the 6th round ended the fight decisively. There was no celebration of ego, just confirmation. Even fighters known for flash eventually learned this lesson, sometimes painfully. Prince Nasim built his image on spectacle, but at his best, the show was backed by timing and awareness. Against Kevin Kelly, when he was dropped early, the response wasn't panic or denial. It was adjustment. That moment separates arrogance from adaptability. Fighters who mistake flash for invincibility don't survive those moments. Fighters who understand when to switch gears do. That distinction defines careers. Adrien Broner struggled with that balance. The build-up against Maidana was full of confidence, jokes, and dismissal. Inside the ring, Broner kept trying to fight the version of the bout he had imagined. Maidana fought the one that was actually happening. Pressure collapsed space. Exchanges multiplied. Broner was dragged into a fight he couldn't pace. Knockdowns rewrote the narrative. Even when Broner rallied late, the fight had already been decided. Control had been taken and never returned. Boxing punishes fighters who refuse to accept new information. Silence, discipline, and patience don't look dangerous until they suddenly are. They don't generate clips before the fight. They don't trend on social media. But once the bell rings, they start stacking advantages that are hard to erase. Small steps, better angles, cleaner shots, less wasted energy. Over time, those advantages turn into inevitability. Arrogance thrives on immediacy. It wants dominance now. It wants affirmation now. Discipline is comfortable waiting. It trusts the process. That's why the collision between the two is almost always one-sided. When fighters finally realize the silence wasn't weakness, it's usually too late. The legs feel heavier. The counters arrive sooner. The crowd grows quieter. The body starts responding slower than the mind commands it to. That's the moment arrogance has no answer for. Because you can't shout your way out of a losing position. By the time the arrogant fighter starts listening, the disciplined one is already dictating the final chapter. And in boxing, the final chapter doesn't care how loud the buildup was. It only remembers who was left standing. There is a moment in every fight when belief is tested not by words, but by consequence. It's the instant a plan stops working and the fighter has to decide whether to adapt or double down. Arrogance almost always chooses the second option. It insists that the answer is more of the same, harder, louder, faster. Discipline pauses, recalculates, and changes course. That difference is often invisible to the crowd until it's decisive. Roy Jones Jr. understood this instinctively. Against Thomas Tate, the mismatch wasn't just athletic. It was cognitive. Tate joked, posed, and treated the bout like a showcase he'd already won. Jones didn't rush. He read. He saw openings forming before Tate even realized he was offering them. When the right hand landed clean in the second round, it wasn't a surprise to Jones. It was confirmation. Tate's refusal to respect the danger had shortened the fight dramatically. Confidence had crossed into carelessness, and boxing punished it immediately. That same pattern unfolded countless times across the sport, sometimes over rounds, sometimes over seconds. Fighters who believe their identity alone can carry them begin fighting the memory of themselves rather than the opponent in front of them. They expect reactions that never come. They wait for fear that doesn't appear. And when reality refuses to cooperate, frustration sets in. Vic Darinian fought Nonito Donaire with that expectation. He had built a career on intimidation, on opponents shrinking under his power. Donaire didn't shrink. He observed. Each round revealed more about Darinian's habits. Wide swings, dropped hands, predictable entries. By the 5th round, the opening was there. Donaire didn't force it. He stepped in and delivered one of the most devastating left hands of the year. The fight ended in an instant, but the unraveling had been happening quietly for minutes. Arrogance doesn't hear the warning signs because it assumes control is permanent. Some fighters carry arrogance as armor. They believe showing vulnerability is weakness. They talk through damage. They smile through pressure. Adrien Broner tried to laugh his way through Maidana's relentless offense. Each smile cost him energy. Each joke distracted from the need to adjust. Maidana didn't respond emotionally. He kept pressing, kept throwing, kept dragging Broner into exchanges that demanded honesty. By the time Broner tried to assert himself, the rhythm was gone. Control had slipped through his fingers. Even fighters who survive those nights are changed by them. The mirror becomes less forgiving. Preparation becomes heavier. Doubt sneaks in where certainty once lived. That's the lasting cost of arrogance. It doesn't always end careers, but it fractures them. Joe Calzaghe never allowed that fracture. Against Bernard Hopkins, he absorbed the noise and stayed committed to output and movement. Hopkins had moments, but Calzaghe's consistency never wavered. He didn't chase knockouts. He didn't chase statements. He chased rounds. By the end, the result was undeniable. The fighter who trusted volume and discipline outworked the one who tried to win the fight psychologically before it began. The same lesson appeared in Riddick's dismantling of Jorge Luis Gonzalez. Gonzalez carried years of resentment into the ring and tried to ignite Bo emotionally. Bo refused. He let Gonzalez empty himself with words and rushed attacks. Then he punished the mistakes. Knockdown. Finish. No drama. No theatrics. Just execution. This is where arrogance truly collapses. Not when it's mocked, but when it's ignored. When opponents refuse to play the role assigned to them. When the fight becomes a technical problem instead of an emotional one. Boxing has no interest in how confident a fighter feels walking to the ring. It only measures how they respond when the fight stops following their expectations. Some fighters learn to adjust. They grow quieter. They study more. They prepare differently. Others cling to the version of themselves that once worked, convinced the sport is wrong instead of adapting to reality. That's how eras pass. That's how new names replace old ones. Every generation produces fighters who believe they are the exception, who think the rules don't apply to them, who assume discipline is optional because talent feels unlimited. And every generation produces moments that remind everyone watching that boxing has always favored those who listen when the fight speaks back. Arrogance talks. Discipline responds. By the time the final bell rings, only one of them is still standing. By the time a fighter reaches the final chapter of a night like this, the story is no longer about punches. It's about memory, about what stays with them when the lights dim, when the crowd disperses, and when the echo of their own words comes back louder than any chant. Boxing never forgets what you promised before the bell. It simply waits to see whether you can live with it afterward. This is why the sport has always been ruthless with ego. It doesn't reject confidence. It demands proof. The fighters who survive longest are the ones who understand that silence is a weapon and patience is power. They don't need to announce dominance because they trust the process that gets them there. The ones who fall hardest are usually the ones who believe the fight was already won before it began. Look closely at the pattern that repeats itself across eras. Fighters enter with bravado, headlines, and certainty. They perform for cameras, for crowds, for their own reflection. And then, somewhere between rounds, reality interrupts. The opponent doesn't fold. The plan doesn't work. The timing is off by half a second. The legs feel heavier than expected. That's when boxing asks its final question. Can you adapt or will you insist? Kevin Kelly insisted. He talked himself into a finish that wasn't there. Prince Nasim, for all his showmanship, understood something deeper. He could absorb a moment of danger and still reset. When Kelly went down for the second time, the difference was obvious. One fighter was fighting emotion. The other was fighting opportunity. Devin Haney never gave Ryan Garcia the chaos he wanted. He didn't argue with the noise. He didn't match volume with volume. He stayed measured, methodical, and focused. And even when controversy followed, the core truth remained. One fighter relied on belief. The other relied on preparation. Only one of those survives long-term scrutiny. What separates legends from cautionary tales isn't talent. Boxing history is full of talent that burned out early. What separates them is humility disguised as discipline. The willingness to treat every opponent as dangerous. The restraint to let the fight unfold instead of forcing a narrative. The patience to win ugly if necessary. Even the most explosive knockouts in this sport are rarely accidents. They're the result of fighters who waited while their opponents rushed, who stayed sharp while others chased moments. When Nonito Donaire landed that left hand, it wasn't luck. It was inevitability. Darinian had been leaving the door open all night. Arrogance convinced him no one would walk through it. That's the quiet truth behind every highlight reel finish. Someone believed they were safe when they weren't. And the aftermath is always the same. Interviews sound different. Smiles are tighter. Excuses creep in. Fighters talk about bad nights, injuries, distractions. Very few admit the simplest explanation. They underestimated the cost of ignoring fundamentals. Boxing doesn't humiliate fighters for entertainment. It exposes what they bring into the ring. If they bring discipline, it rewards them with longevity. If they bring ego, it turns that ego into a lesson the whole world can see. That's why these stories never get old. Because the names change, the divisions change, the eras change, but the theme never does. The ring doesn't care who you think you are. It only cares what you do when things go wrong. And for every fighter watching from the locker room or the living room, the message is unmistakable. Talk doesn't win rounds. Reputation doesn't block punches. Confidence without discipline is just another liability waiting to be exposed. If you've made it this far, ask yourself which fighters stayed with you the most. Was it the loudest ones, or the ones who let their work speak? Which moment felt inevitable the second it happened? And which collapse felt avoidable in hindsight? Let me know in the comments which humbling moment hit the hardest, which fighter you think learned the most from defeat, and which ego you believe boxing still hasn't finished correcting. If you enjoy stories where hype meets reality and discipline tells the final truth, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned. The next lesson is always just one bell away. By the time the seventh part of this story unfolds, the pattern is no longer subtle. It's carved into the history of a sport, etched into highlight reels and post-fight interviews, whispered in gyms where young fighters swear they'll never make the same mistakes. And yet, they almost always do. Because arrogance doesn't announce itself as a flaw. It disguises itself as destiny. This is where boxing becomes cyclical. New fighters rise, convinced they've cracked the code. They study the legends, mimic the swagger, repeat the quotes, adopt the persona. What they rarely copy is the discipline that existed long before the cameras arrived. The road work in silence. The rounds sparred when no one was watching. The humility to admit weaknesses before an opponent can exploit them. The sport rewards hunger, but it punishes entitlement. Fighters who believe their ascent guarantees immunity start cutting corners without realizing it. Camps get shorter. Sparring gets lighter. Defense becomes optional because offense feels inevitable. And when the night comes, they expect the ring to cooperate. It never does. You can see it in the body language long before the stoppage. The way a fighter looks back at their corner after a clean shot lands. The subtle shake of the head, not in pain, but in disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. That moment, when expectation clashes with reality, is where careers bend. Some bend forward, others snap. Those who survive learn something uncomfortable. That dominance isn't loud. It's repetitive. It's boring to watch in training and brutal to face in competition. It's built on habits, so ingrained they function under stress. Fighters like that don't panic when plans fall apart, because their identity isn't tied to a single outcome. They adjust, they adapt, they endure. The ones who don't learn keep chasing the version of themselves that once worked. They replay old knockouts. They blame opponents for running. They convince themselves the judges, the refs, the system are all against them. Anything but the truth. Anything but accountability. And boxing keeps accepting the offering. Because the ring is honest in a way few places are. It strips away marketing, trash talk, and hype. It reduces everything to timing, balance, decision-making, and resolve. You can't out-talk a right hand. You can't intimidate fatigue. You can't argue with gravity when your legs give out. That's why the most respected fighters in the sport often speak the least before fights. They've seen what happens to those who promise too much. They understand that every word adds weight. Every boast becomes something the opponent wants to take from you. Silence, on the other hand, leaves nothing to steal. In the end, arrogance doesn't just lose fights. It shortens windows. It turns potential dynasties into what-ifs. It leaves behind footage that gets replayed not for greatness, but for caution. And for fans, those moments are unforgettable, not because they enjoy watching fighters fail, but because they're watching truth unfold in real time. Boxing doesn't care about intentions. It responds to preparation. It doesn't reward belief unless belief is backed by work. And it never misses an opportunity to remind the world that no one is exempt. So the next time a fighter steps into the spotlight, convinced the outcome is already decided, remember this pattern. Remember how many before them said the same thing. Remember how many learned the hard way that confidence is only valuable when it's quiet enough to listen. Because in this sport, the loudest lesson is always delivered without words. At this stage of the story, it becomes impossible to pretend these moments are isolated. They aren't accidents. They aren't bad luck. They are consequences layered over time, quietly forming long before the first punch is thrown. By the time a fighter reaches the ring, convinced the outcome is guaranteed, the loss has often already begun somewhere far from the cameras. This is where arrogance shows its most dangerous form. Not in trash talk, not in theatrics, but in routine. In the small decisions that stop feeling important. An extra rest day instead of road work. Sparring partners chosen for comfort instead of challenge. Corners filled with yes men instead of truth tellers. Nothing dramatic changes all at once, and that's why it goes unnoticed. The fighter still looks sharp, still feels powerful, still believes. But boxing keeps receipts. When pressure arrives, it doesn't test strength first. It tests habits. And habits don't rise to the occasion, they reveal themselves. Fighters who relied on intimidation suddenly realize intimidation has an expiration date. Opponents today have watched the footage. They've studied the patterns. They've accepted the risk. Fear no longer does the work. That's when the ring turns quiet in a way that feels uncomfortable. The crowd senses it before the fighters do. A rhythm shifts. The confident walk slows. The hands come back a half second later than they should. And the opponent, often dismissed in the build-up, starts to believe. Belief is contagious. Once it changes sides, it's nearly impossible to reverse. You can see it in exchanges where one fighter expects respect and doesn't get it. Punches come back harder. Angles appear where there shouldn't be any. The fight stops being about proving dominance and becomes about survival. That transition is brutal for fighters who built their identity on control. Some try to force their way out of it. They swing wider. They chase moments. They abandon patience because patience feels like surrender. And that's when discipline delivers its final verdict. Clean shots land. Balance disappears. The margin for error collapses. What's left afterward is silence. The walk back to the locker room feels longer than the walk-in. Cameras catch fragments, a glance at the floor, a towel over the head, a corner trying to speak, but not knowing what to say. The words from the build-up hang in the air, heavier now, stripped of confidence, and filled with irony. And yet, This is also where boxing offers something rare: clarity. For the fighters who are willing to accept it, moments like these become turning points. They rebuild. They simplify. They relearn fundamentals they once thought they were beyond. They return quieter, sharper, harder to read. Ego gives way to craft. Those fighters last. For the ones who can't let go, the decline is slow but relentless. Each fight becomes an attempt to reclaim a past version of themselves. Each loss is explained away. Each win feels less convincing. The sport moves on, as it always does, leaving behind highlights and warnings in equal measure. This is why fans keep watching these stories unfold. Not because they enjoy downfall, but because boxing reveals something universal. Talent is fragile without structure. Confidence is empty without preparation. And arrogance, no matter how convincing, always meets something stronger eventually. The ring doesn't argue. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care how loudly a fighter believed. It only responds to what shows up when the bell rings. And by the time that truth is learned, it's already been written into history. By the time the 8th chapter reveals itself, the lesson has fully separated from the individuals who first carried it. The fighters, the fights, the eras all begin to blur together, but the truth underneath sharpens. Boxing is not a sport that teaches gently. It repeats itself until the message can no longer be ignored. What lingers most after these nights isn't the violence. It's the contrast. The contrast between who a fighter believed they were and who the ring proved them to be. That gap is where legends are born or exposed. And once it's visible, it never completely closes again. This is why the most dangerous fighters are rarely the loudest. They are the ones who've already been humbled and learned from it. They don't chase validation. They don't need moments to feel real. They understand that boxing rewards consistency far more than confidence. They arrive prepared to work, not to perform. You can feel that difference the moment they step into the ring. Their movements are economical. Their eyes are calm. They're not rushing to make a statement because they know the fight will make one for them. Every round is approached as a problem to solve, not a stage to dominate. And when adversity comes, they don't panic because adversity is familiar territory. For everyone else, the ring becomes a mirror they didn't ask for. It reflects every shortcut, every overlooked flaw, every lie told during the build-up. The crowd may not understand the technical reasons in real time, but they recognize the shift. Momentum doesn't lie. Confidence drains. The narrative flips. This is where boxing becomes unforgiving in a uniquely human way. There's no one else to blame, no teammates to hide behind, no system to absorb the failure. Just one fighter realizing too late that belief alone doesn't hold up under pressure. That realization lands harder than any punch. And yet, this is also why the sport remains compelling. Because redemption is always possible, but never guaranteed. Fighters who accept responsibility can rewrite themselves. They come back stripped of excess, focused on fundamentals, hungry in a way arrogance never allows. Others resist the lesson, clinging to old identities until the sport moves on without them. Fans remember both types, but for different reasons. They remember the disciplined fighters for what they accomplished. They remember the arrogant ones for what they squandered. And often, the difference between the two wasn't talent or opportunity, but timing. The moment when the fighter chose whether to listen or insist. Boxing doesn't rush that decision. It waits. It lets patterns repeat. It gives chances until it doesn't. And when it finally closes the door, there's no appeal process, no rewrite. Just footage, records, and the quiet understanding of what could have been done differently. That's the final weight of these stories. Not the knockouts, not the trash talk, not the humiliation, but the clarity. The realization that the sport was never personal. It was always precise. And long after the belts change hands and the crowds move on, that precision remains, waiting for the next fighter who believes they're exempt. As the 9th chapter unfolds, the narrative shifts from individual battles to the enduring legacy of those who have truly mastered the craft. Boxing is a theater of both skill and psychology, and by now, it has revealed its recurring patterns. Arrogance punished, preparation rewarded, timing everything. What separates the fleeting stars from the legends is not merely victory, but the manner in which they handle the relentless pressure of expectation. By this stage, it's no longer about a single opponent in a single night. It's about the accumulation of experience, the understanding that each fight is a lesson in human limitation and resilience. Fighters who arrive with ego intact may win the opening rounds through sheer power or flash, but the ring has a way of peeling away pretension, exposing the gaps in footwork, the tells in timing, the cracks in defense. Each round is a mirror reflecting their true readiness, or the lack thereof. The most compelling moments come when the supposed underdog, the disciplined, patient, methodical fighter, seizes control from the very first indication of overconfidence. It's a chess match in motion, probing jabs, feints, subtle shifts in stance. The crowd feels the shift before it is fully executed, recognizing the inevitability even if they can't articulate it. And when the decisive blows land, there is a sense of inevitability, as if the universe itself has aligned to reward preparation over bravado. History remembers these nights not for the flashy entrances or the pre-fight posturing, but for the precision and intelligence displayed inside the ropes. Every punch, every counter, every pivot is a testament to years of study, sweat, and sacrifice. The fighter who survives the early chaos, who remains composed under fire, emerges not just as a winner of that contest, but as a living blueprint for future aspirants. It is also in these later chapters that the psychological dimension of boxing becomes undeniable. Opponents begin to internalize doubt, hesitation creeping in where once there was certainty. A single clean combination, perfectly timed, can erode an opponent's confidence faster than 100 words ever could. Even the most experienced fighters learn that fear is often the silent victor, whispered into the ears of those who allow themselves to be distracted by spectacle rather than substance. And yet, the ring is merciful in its clarity. It doesn't reward narrative, hype, or promise. It rewards execution. It offers lessons repeatedly until the student either comprehends them or is left behind. Those who internalize the truths of timing, precision, and patience transform into legends. Those who do not become cautionary tales, studied as examples of potential squandered. In this ninth act, the story's rhythm slows for reflection. The triumphs, the mistakes, the lessons, they all converge into a singular realization. Boxing is unforgiving, but fair. It strips away artifice and leaves only the essential, the undeniable truth of skill versus desire, preparation versus impulse. And in that truth, audiences discover both the beauty and the brutality of the sport, leaving them with a lingering question. Who among today's fighters will rise above the rest to be remembered as more than a champion, but as a master of the ring? The drama continues as it always does, because every fight is both an ending and a beginning, a new lesson, a new challenge, a new chapter in the relentless story of boxing's finest.